Good afternoon, Ukraine Media Center starts its operation. My name is Vasil Samokhvalov, and today, in the eve of the International Day of Human Rights, we will be discussing the country which keeps violating those rights. I mean, Russia, definitely. And we will talk about those horrific violations that they commit, including sexual violence. And we will discuss it with a number of experts. We will have two parts of our panel discussion, two pools of speakers. And we are about to find out about an important initiative to add Russia to the United Nations so-called list of shame. So let me introduce our speakers. Those attending our first panel. It's Andrei Kachmadalov, the head of the NGO 29 December. Iryna Dovhan, head of SEMA Ukraine, member of the board of the Global Survivors Fund for Survivors of CRSV. She will be joining us online. Ms. Olena Lazarieva, member of SEMA Ukraine. Ms. Liudmyla Huseinova, member of the Supervisory Board of the Urgent Interim Reparations for CRSV Survivors pilot project and founder of the Let's Go Sisters NGO, and Mr. Oleksiy Syvak, founder of Graduates NGO. So, Mr. Andrei, what is this initiative about? What is the list of shame? What does it mean? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Starting with 2014, with the beginning of the so-called Crimean Spring occupation of Donbass, Russian Federation started using tortures, different kinds of torturing and sexualized violence. And it all was happening towards, those crimes were committed towards prisoners of war and the civilians at the places of their illegal detention. With the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation in February 2024, such cases went on a catastrophically large scale. Torturing and sexual violence have become a standard. And it's important to mention, to emphasize that they have become a tool for intimidation of prisoners of war and the civilians back in 2008. The United Nations Security Council recognized CRSV as a phenomenon that is posing threat to peace and security. And since then, different practices started being evolved that would allow avoiding such CRSV cases. And one of such practices is an annual address of the United Nations Secretary General about CRSV in the zone of conflicts. And annexed to that address, that lists the parties which were violated, those who commit those crimes, I mean CRSV. Can Russian Federation be added to that list? Well, from our perspective, definitely there are all the reasons to do so. With the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Office of Prosecutor General of Ukraine has documented 316 cases of CRSV. 200 women have become survivors, plus 15 minors, and the rest were men. So can the data tell us that CRSV is a systemic policy of Russian Federation? Definitely so. But United Nations Organization is using the reports of independent experts who also work in Ukraine. There is a number of organizations involved in monitoring of CRSV, including supranationals. There is an international task force represented by the experts from 20 countries and representatives of Europol. For example, there is a report from an international task force, and within 2023, they say that there are convincing evidences that the use of CRSV by representatives of Russian Federation as a systemic policy. Sexual violence was committed against women, men, and minors. So again, given this scale of evidence, Russian Federation was not yet added to that list. The annex listing all of the criminal countries which commit this type of crime. Unfortunately, I have no answer to this question. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen automatically. And to seek it, we need to advocate it. We need to show some activity. And one of the stages is our address to the United Nations Secretary General, asking to have Russian Federation added to that list based on those evidences that show Russians' involvement in CRSV. Thank you. So let's give the floor to the rest of our speakers, and then we'll proceed to discussion. I'm asking the technical team to put Iryna Dovhan on the screen. I mean, this letter is a substantial part of the advocacy process. Please put Ms. Iryna on the screen. Ms. Iryna, can you hear us? Are you hearing us? Are you hearing us well? I'm asking our technical team to channel the sound to the floor. I'm hearing you clear and loud. Very good. So, Ms. Iryna, can you please tell us about the letter, about its contents and the structure? So, what have you been emphasizing? What were your arguments? And in your opinion, why should this letter work? So, what is this letter for me? First of all, it means something to me personally. That's yet another step, and I hope an important step in our fight for justice. I experienced violence back in 2014. It's been 11 and a half years. My first evidences were given back in September 2014 in the United Nations. This is when my voice was sounding and I was able to tell about what I've experienced, what I've been through, all that violence. And I started moving forward to make sure that the most of the non-government organizations, government organizations, heads of different states hear about what Russia was doing. I am feeling guilty for not shouting loud enough. But are those who were listening to me, are they feeling guilty for doing nothing? And after the beginning of the full-scale invasion back in 2022, the number of people like me has grown like for thousands. I think that this important letter is yet another voice, another call for justice, and I hope that this letter will be heard. And this letter, people like me have emphasized what their hearts and souls are screaming about. Every single word in this letter is our pain, our hope for justice. Everyone can hear it. Everyone can read it. And we hope that eventually our collective address, our collective voice, our collective demand will be heard. We demand Russian Federation to be added to the list of shame for systemic commitment of CRSV against the citizens of Ukraine. We have evidences, we have names of those people. We have all of the information that can the global law enforcement agencies use. And now is the time for us to be heard and the justice to start. I vest serious hopes in this letter. This letter is our heart and our soul. Thank you so much. Thank you, Miss Iryna, Miss Olena. You're the colleague. Can you please tell us what is the benefit of it? Why is it important? Shame list or non-shame list? Yeah, the microphone is working. Good afternoon, everybody. Just like my colleagues have said, the war in Ukraine has not started in 2022. It started back in 2014, and all of us here, we are all affected by this war. We were affected in different phases of it. Someone in the very beginning, someone after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, somewhere in the middle. And that's why I hope and I want our voices to be eventually heard, because as Ms. Iryna has said, we have been probably talking about it. We've been talking about it since 2014, but probably not loud enough. No, we were not perseverant enough, and probably now, when this letter is written, we hope that eventually the international community, all of it, United Nations member countries and the organization itself will hear us, because what was going on until this moment, those were not single crimes, not crimes committed by Russian soldiers, like single Russian soldiers. That's a systemic terror mechanism aimed at quarreling and eradicating Ukrainian people, suppressing it, and it hurts that after 11 years of war, we're still not heard, because there were many calls before, but so far what the international community does is show their deep concern and keep silent. And after their silence and concern, all those crimes continue, the crimes that we're discussing now. And I'd like to say that we are all affected by CRSV during Russian-Ukrainian war, but we don't want to be consoled. We don't want compassion. We want you to stand by our side and fight for recognizing Russia as an aggressor country and having them added to this list. That's why with this letter we're calling, for us it's very important, we're urging all of the global community not to stay silent. We're not silent, so you don't stay silent either. Just hear us, because your silence makes you an associate, so please stop being silent. Thank you very much. I would like you to ask to pass the mic to Ms. Liudmyla. Well, we mentioned that there is a deep concern on part of the world, so can you please tell us more about the advocacy? What is the number of Ukrainian organizations that have become part of this list? Whom have you communicated? Who supports us? Who is ready to support us in this process? Ms. Olena, I agree that we don't want to be comforted. We want everybody standing by our side, and I would like to emphasize these words of previous panelists, that the war has been going on since 2014, and the support of CRSV survivors is not so active, and what I would like to do today is to empower the voices of the survivors, to communicate to the survivors that they have a right to justice. I'm seeing in this room the representative of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, and I want to think that I appreciate all that hard work that you're doing. I don't know what was going on before the year 2018, 2022, but after I was set free, I see quite an intense process. I see Ms. Kateryna Levchenko, and I was mentioning a lot her intense work in this area, incredible work she's doing to support and to unite the survivors. I want to mention that today we're establishing the new organization, Let's Go Sisters, and we emphasize the women who had to leave for other countries, and among them there is a significant number of those who were affected by CRSV. I want to address the women who are the members of Let's Go Sisters. They live in Germany, they live in Czech Republic, and they will be our ambassadors to share this letter and urge the global community to support this letter. I know that a lot of NGOs here in Ukraine are already our co-fighters for our right to justice. I mean, Media Initiative for Human Rights, National Society of the Journalists of Ukraine, member of which I am, and we are about to develop the strategy to spread the word. How can we get as much voices involved to make sure that this letter is being paid attention to? It seems to us sometimes that too little is done. Sometimes it seems like not so much people understand us. But recently I had an opportunity to attend a United Nations session that was addressed by Hillary Clinton, and I was impressed by her resolution to have Russia added to this list. That was her words, her demand, and I think if we all support this letter, she will support it as well. We need to look for help. We need to share the word about this letter. We have to explain what do we want to say with this letter, what are we seeking. And we have to understand that this demand for justice is not only for the survivors, for CRSV survivors, is the demand for justice for everybody, including you, everybody in this room, many journalists. It's our aspiration to justice. We can't say it's about our rights, and it's our own business. It's the business of all of the Ukraine. It's the business of all of the world. Thank you, Mr. Oleksiy. Well, to have this letter transform into a part of this annex, this list, what should be done? How do you assess the chances for us to walk this road? Well, first of all, we need to stand together, like my colleagues have said, and to communicate it to the society, to stand united, to communicate it positively. Basically, I can only voice my hopes, my aspirations, but the letter itself is not like our voices. You were loud enough. They just didn't want to hear you. I hope that this letter will be heard, because it's not about our voices. It's about the voices of those people who are staying there, those who are being tortured right as we're talking. The international community expresses their deepest concern, but it's only worse for us. I personally hope that this letter will be a call for action, and the global community will start acting, not only talking, but proceed to their real actions. Thank you so much. So let's just summarize our first part. I'm asking our panelists to take their seats in the first rows, and I would like to invite to the floor Ms. Kateryna Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Policy, and Oleksandr Osipov, representative of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Equal Rights and Freedoms, Rights of National Minorities, Political and Religious Beliefs. And I'm asking our technical team to take away 2 chairs. Good afternoon. And also joining us online will be Ms. Yevheniia Lukianchenko, advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration, and Anna Sosonska, representative of the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Just in brief, in order not to get entangled in all those positions. So let's start with Ms. Yevheniia. I'm asking the technical team to put her on the screen. Ms. Yevheniia, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Are you hearing me? We're hearing you loud and clear, and we're hearing you. That's magnificent. So we were talking about this initiative launched by the Ukrainian civil society about our aspirations to have Russian Federation added to the list of shame, a resolution that should be approved by the United Nations that is about some bureaucratic procedures. So I'm having a simple question. What the track should look like? What are we supposed to do? How do we make sure that Russia ends up on that list? Because it will be a diplomatic victory of Ukraine. It will be another lever of pressure. So, step by step, what is the plan? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, specifically the survivors. It's really an important event. It's serious that we're talking about it in the eve of the International Day of Human Rights. It's not an easy talk, but we have to do it, and we have to do it all together. I would like to say that at the government level, there is support of this letter, and we will do everything that depends on us. But the fact that there is such a joint position by the survivors, it facilitates our work, because we're seeing that it's the demand coming from the survivors, and we really celebrate this public call, the fact that you're standing united. Why is it important now? Because this issue is politically significant. Having Russian Federation added to the list of countries which commit CRSV will be an intense signal to international community. It will demonstrate the systemic nature of Russian Federation's crime. Another thing why is it important is the moral responsibility of the global community. And the global responsibility, I want to emphasize it. It will be a public official recognition of survivors who require satisfaction, re-establishment of justice, and international support. And re-establishment of justice is one of the key elements of this moral support and moral responsibility, because the war in Ukraine is the war of values, the war between the good and evil, and I'm confident Ukraine is going to win. Why is it important again, and why do we have to continue working in this area? Is the signal that even such a powerful, seemingly powerful country as Russian Federation will still hold accountable for crimes committed in Ukraine in relation of women, men, children, and those horrific tortures they're committing against our population. Why is it important now? Because there is a tendency to the officially to the growth of officially documented cases of CRSV, but for the United Nations, it's important to see the report of the United Nations on the rights of prisoners of war who were set free, and it was published, and in compliance with this list, 68% of the prisoners of war are being subject to the tortures that are of sexual nature. So for the United Nations, it's a huge evidence that they will definitely use in their report. But our cases that we document, our Prosecutor General's office is documented, is an incredibly important component of evidence in this crime. What is it can give us in the international arena? It will be international pressure at the diplomatic front, pressure over Russian Federation, and I can say that the experience of having Russian Federation added to similar reports in 2013, 2014, the report of Ms. Gamba about the rights of children during the armed conflict. Russian Federation was added to this report twice for systemically violating the rights of children, rights to access to education, deportation of children, and it brought the issue of deportation of Ukrainian children to Russian Federation and Belarus, brought it up to the top diplomatic level. And this resolution to have Russia added to the report of Ms. Gamba, which was repeated twice, supported International Criminal Court in issuing two warrants to have Putin and Commissioner for Children's Rights Maria Lvova arrested. So I think that the outlook to have Russia added to the list of shame as an actor committing such horrific crimes is pretty good, and we have to continue working in this area, to continue discussing it in international arena, but also hear the voices of the survivors. So again, the fact that it's coming from the survivors, it's a big plus, and we'll take all efforts to make it heard by the Secretary General of the United Nations Special Representative for CRSV crimes, to make sure that the report that will be presented in March next year, well, to have Russia added to this list. So what can we do is advocacy, more discussions at the level of the survivors. You talk to different survivors from different corners of the world, and the more this information is communicated, the bigger are the chances that we achieve our goal. Also, we have to continue our communication with the international partners, with the embassy, emphasizing that there is an incredible need for us to reestablish the justice, to get satisfaction, and to make sure there is respect to the human rights, and there is a respect to international law in general. So on my end, I would like to express my incredible respect. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit agitated. Just a simple human pain that I'm feeling as I investigate those cases, because it's our common sorrow, and on our end we do everything to make sure that the survivors get all relevant services, all reasonable legal aid, and to make sure that there is justice for our society and that those guilty of those crimes are being held accountable. I want to thank Ms. Liudmyla, Ms. Olena, and other survivors. You're doing an incredible job, and please know that we're standing with you and we'll stand with you until the very end. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kateryna. We were repeating this word advocacy because for Gutierrez and other officials of the United Nations, it turns out that the resolution should not only be legal, but it should be supported by some public demand. So how do we ensure this advocacy? We were mentioning Hillary Clinton and other opinion leaders. So how are we fighting for our truth? Thank you, Mr. Vasil. I would only like to say that we were listening to Miss Hillary Clinton with Miss Liudmyla Huseinova. We were in that room where it was celebrated the 15th anniversary of the mandate of a representative of United Nations on CRSV, and her call was really her address was fiery and very convincing, and it was met with a standing ovation by the whole room, which I think demonstrates certain support. Miss Hillary Clinton keeps working, but she's far away, and we're here. And the first and most important in this advocacy is an absolute unity of thoughts and ideals of our organizations established by those who survived the sexual violence, as well as the government, the commissioner's office, and other representatives of state agencies. It's important for us. And it's the case when our voice, our joint voice, has to be heard, has to create some synergy, and we continue working on it with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Office of the Government Commissioner, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've prepared the informational framework for communication of this problem for our diplomats, for our government officials. It can be used by the civil society organizations, representatives of international organizations, and it's really important. Currently, the Office of the Special Representative for CRSV is preparing a report. Most likely it will be ready, the draft will be ready by the end of December, probably early January, and then it will be communicated to the countries. We are about to get that part that is related to Ukraine with the countries that were included on the report. And then it will be presented during one of the sessions of the United Nations Security Council by the Special Representative with the participation of the Secretary General or their deputy. And here we're coming into the long month of national work. National because we need to have as much signatures as possible after this letter, and it's the task that those organizations of the survivors are facing. And on the other hand, we need to exercise an intense information communication campaign. I want to thank you once again. You've prepared the letter, and we are really making it public in the eve of the Day of Human Rights. And by this, we emphasize once again that Russian authorities, Russian occupational troops, have committed all possible war crimes identified by the national government and violated all possible human rights which are a standard. So it's not the end of our work today. Today, it's an important beginning of this work. It's an urge for others to join us. And I want to say that we enjoy international support. Ukraine is a member of the Global Alliance for Countering CRSV. And it was created upon the initiative of the British government. We were actively working in 2023 2024. And in 2025, we need not only to actively fight, but Ukraine won its right to become the head of this alliance. And we would like to have more countries added to this alliance, along with the international organizations, global civil organizations working in this area. So again, this is where we can promote our ideas. And talking about the numbers, you were saying the figures that the Office of Prosecutor General has, and we have the figures by the United Nations Office, and we have the figures coming from this project of interim reparations that is exercised in close cooperation by the government, Parliamentary Commissioner for Human Rights, the survivors themselves, and international organizations, specifically the United Nations subdivisions. So as of today, as of the 9th of December, we got 586 reports. So it's 250 more than the Prosecutor General's office figures, and the reparations were paid to 359 persons, 163 women and 193 men, one boy, one girl, and 2 boys. It's not about the small figures. It's about the survivors not coming to, not addressing the law enforcement, but they still want justice, and they are seeking help from international organizations or civil organizations. So again, different organizations operate different figures, and still all those figures are at top of the iceberg. And it's an argument for Mr. Antonio Guterres, for United Nations organization. We don't know the exact number, but the assessments, the estimates, still evidence using of CRSV on a large scale, but the campaign is going to be intense. We'll come back to this room, and we need media to spread the word, to make sure that our citizens know that there is an opportunity to hold Russia accountable, not only in courts. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is the topic that requires serious communication, and when it comes to the figures, I think we can talk to Ms. Sosonska. Please put her on the screen. Is our speaker online? Oh, Ms. Anna, we're hearing you, but we're not seeing you, unfortunately. So we were just talking about the figures. We were talking about the evidences, and we understand that such resolutions will be approved based on some substantiated figures, and we understand the significant role of the Office of Prosecutors General. Oh, now we're seeing you. Well, in fighting for Ukraine's interest and pushing the international organizations to their resolutions. So what is the role of the Office of Prosecutor General? Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to say that the Office of Prosecutor General supports all of the advocacy initiatives regarding having Russian Federation, the aggressor, added to the so-called list of shame, the list of countries responsible of systemic CRSV during the conflict itself. And during the last 2 years, the Office of Prosecutors General, on their end, works with different institutions, including United Nations organization, into tracks first provision of verified data about CRSV facts, those verified by the Prosecutor General's office. We hand over such facts on a monthly basis to relevant institutions, and starting from the January 2024, between us and the monitoring mission of the United Nations in Ukraine. So we've entered into an agreement on handing over the data about the survivors who provide consent about their data to be handed over. So we hand their data over along with their evidences to the United Nations, so their evidences can be included in their monthly and semi-annual and annual reports on adherence with human rights. And into reports of the monitoring mission, those data were already included and they were made public. Also, the monitoring mission cooperates with the Office of the Prosecutor General in having the information handed over about the conditions in which Ukrainian prisoners of war are being held in. I mean, we're talking here about prisoners of war and civilians who are being illegally held captive, both in temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and Russian Federation. Those are our verified cases that are being handed over to the United Nations Monitoring Mission for fact-checking, but it's important to understand that United Nations and the Office of Prosecutor General are two independent institutions, and definitely we cannot disclose the pre-court or pre-trial secrecy. That's why we don't hand over the facts about CRSV, about which we didn't get the consent of the survivors. Certain part of the CRSV survivors, they have certain bias about cooperation with United Nations institutions, specifically when it comes to the most recent visit of the United Nations Secretary General to Russian Federation. It was perceived by a number of people as confirmation of the fact that United Nations are attempting to cooperate with Russian Federation, and the Office of the Prosecutor General does the explanation work. What does this process involve to have a country added to the list of shame? So it was already mentioned here about Ms. Gamba, who sought having Russia added to the list of shame on a juvenile track, but it was preceded by the visit of Ms. Gamba to Russian Federation itself. So again, before any country is added to any lists, including the list of shame, CRSV list of shame, we need to get the official explanation from the party which is accused of such violations. And I know that there is such communication on part of the United Nations, but currently there are no official responses about this situation coming from Russian Federation. So basically, what is the advocacy campaign of the Prosecutor General's office? We cooperate with the Office of the Special Representative of the United Nations for Prevention of CRSV, Pramila Patten, and we also work with other non-government organizations, both national representatives of which are present in your room, and international organizations, because you were mentioning the promotion of Ukrainian problems, and in those institutions, within the framework of advocacy, adding any country to the list of shame, we understand it entails certain risks for the institution itself, because when we talk about inclusion of a country to this list, which systemically has been committed those crimes for almost 12 years in the territory of other sovereign state, but at the same time remains a permanent member of United Nations Security Council. That's why United Nations take it very meticulously, but I know that the Prosecutor General was actively advocating this problem. He was meeting the special representative and was officially stating the position of the Prosecutor General's office about Russia to be included to this list of shame, and we reconfirm our obligation as a law enforcement agency to continue providing evidences about the systemic nature of CRSV and its non-selective nature towards the civilians and the military. So we reconfirm our obligation to provide those data within the legal framework or those legal facts that can support the Office of Prosecutor General and other institutions to have this resolution taken as soon as possible, to have Russia added to this list of shame as an annex to the annual report of the Secretary General. That's why on our end, this advocacy will continue, and we reconfirm our position about our support of this statement that was made public today. And on our end, in case necessary, we will continue actively promoting it and continue getting involved in advocacy campaign. Thank you very much, Ms. Anna, Mr. Oleksandr. We were saying that Mr. Gutierrez and their other respected sirs and madams feel it difficult to do something against a country which is the permanent member of United Nations Security Council, but we know that there is nothing more inadvertent in this world than Western bureaucracy, who is starting slowly, but then keeps moving, destroying all of the obstacles in its way. So you, being a part of government agencies, can you tell us how can we continue this advocacy campaign on the Human Rights Commissioner's track? Thank you very much for your question. Once again, greetings to everybody. Well, I would like to say that we are already doing it. We keep advocating it since the beginning of the war. During all of the international conferences, symposiums, forums, we emphasize it that Russia continues committing war crimes in the territory of Ukraine. And CRSV is no inclusion. It's a heavy crime. It's difficult to imagine it in Europe, in the middle of the European continent, in the 21st century. But at the same time, we have to remember that it's been 11 years of the war, and it's been 11 years that this crime was there. The figures that were made public today, they are evidences. There are evidence in the scale, and we don't know what is the number of people who still keep silent about it. Even one CRSV case is too much today. Well, talking about the Commissioners for Human Rights, the work of Mr. Lubinets in international level is real substantial today, specifically when it comes to the results that we're having. For example, back in 2022, Russian Federation was excluded from the International Ombudsman Institute, the biggest global network. In 2023, they were excluded from international networks of human rights. This year, we've excluded the Russian Commissioner for Human Rights from the Mediterranean Association of Ombudsmen. And a month ago, the Russian Commissioner for Human Rights officially is not a representative of any human rights institution by accreditation of United Nations. So in fact, by now, we've isolated Russian Federation in all human rights international institutions, platforms, and basically at the international level. So any initiative that is about to continue the isolation would continue bringing Russia to accountability needs to be supported. And as I've mentioned, this indicator, I mean the exclusion of Russia from different international human rights institutions, platforms, organizations, is already an evidence of support of our country by the ombudsmen of the world. And we rely on their further support in having Russian Federation brought to liability for crimes they're committing, and in all initiatives where Ukraine, as a civil society, as a government organizations, and we really appreciate the input of the civil society, their incredibly intense participation in all of those processes. So all of it will be supported on our end. Let me repeat myself. We support any initiatives that can help to bring perpetrators to liability, any initiatives that are aimed at reestablishing justice. So in any case, we'll continue working in the international arena to make what I've already described. So thank you. Well, you've said that it's difficult to imagine that CRSV is being committed in the middle of Europe, but we know other cases in the Middle East, Syrian cases, right, African. So I would like to ask, did we rely upon them? What was the experience that we were considering to move along this track of having Russia included in this list of shame? Well, let me start, but I think that it's important then to give the floor to Ms. Liudmyla and our esteemed colleagues. We actively cooperate with different international organizations, and we study the experience of those countries that were through wars and conflicts or are currently going through them. And we know that 12 reports of the Special Representative of the United Nations on CRSV were complemented with this addendum. And a significant number of not only countries, but they can be armed groups, specifically when it comes to internal conflicts. And there are cases when one of the parties to the conflict in Côte d'Ivoire was then excluded from the list because they were able to prove that they've changed their policies, they had the perpetrators punished, and it serves as an example that on one end it's a list for punishment, but on the other hand it's a push to, I mean, for those who ended up on that list, to ponder over their attitude to warfare. Well, there is a horrific thing, but there are rules of war. Well, it seems like the war destroys people and everything around it, but still there is such a notion in the international law. So yes, we were studying the experience, we will continue studying it, and we'll address those partners, civil organizations which support Ukraine, including those which unite the survivors of CRSV. The government of Ukraine back in 2022 signed a memorandum with the foundation of Dr. Muglevi and Global Fund for Reparations to the survivors of CRSV, and there are a lot of initiatives in cooperation with the civil society that we're implementing thanks to our cooperation with those organizations. And definitely I cannot help but saying that we work based on the framework program for cooperation between Ukraine and the United Nations, signed by Ms. Olga Stefanishin and Ms. Kamila Patton as a special representative. So on one hand, we address the Secretary General with the demand to add Russia to this list, we have a lot of evidences, but on the other hand, we cooperate with the United Nations, we cooperate with the countries which are UN member states, and UN being the biggest international organization, and their platform is really important for us. And with this letter, we are going to attend the 69th session for the rights of women, and we'll exercise our activities there. Ukraine is going to form a delegation headed by Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Justice Olga Stefanishyna. So again, those are important things, but we have to understand that it's a joint work of a lot of people and organizations, and I want to thank all of those who initiated it and who is ready to continue working together. Thank you very much. If you want to add anything, just raise your hand so we give you the microphone. Well, probably you can walk up the stage. Yeah, let me walk up here, stand close, because we are going to continue working together side by side. So yes, I support all of what you've just said. We're already having a lot of organizations, the female survivors who are currently abroad, the Union of Women in Kosovo, who survived their terrible stories more than 20 years ago, and they still demand their right for justice, and they seek this justice. But on their example, you can see how long and difficult this way is. Also, with Ms. Iryna Dovhan, we were attending an activity dedicated to the anniversary of organization in Kosovo, and I was really impressed by the strength of these women, by their resilience, that despite such a long period of suffering, they are still able to find the inner force. They have grown stronger, and they believe that they are going to seek their justice, and it's a good example for us that you have to keep working, keep moving forward, and I'm sure that Ms. Farida, who is the head of this organization, will provide us support, will provide us with some significant advice that we will be able to use. Also, me and Olena, we were attending Congo this year. We've seen very strong women there. Real resilient, unbreakable women. They live in a very difficult conditions, but they keep working and they keep inspiring us with their example. It's real important, and I want to say that what is being done in Ukraine now by the communities of the survivors, SEMA, Let's Go Sisters, and it all supports all those of us sisters who left for abroad, and now they express their desire to help, to take all reasonable efforts to help, to become advocates for those difficult stories. Oleksiy has said that we have to be voices for those who are still being held captive, of those who are staying in temporarily occupied territories. I think that our example, our demand to have Russia added to this list of shame is an intense signal for those people. Signal that we are not forgetting, that we take all efforts to set those people free, to free our territories, that we are not going to forgive, but we're not going to avenge. We are going to seek justice, and we will demand reasonable punishment. I want to thank all of these speakers in this room, everybody who joins us online. I think that together we will be able to make it, and we will see Russia in that list of shame. Do we have any questions on the floor? In case we don't have any, I'm having a real small question, and then we'll wrap it up. So, when should we expect any news in this story? How is it going to happen for us then? Well, usually the report is being presented in April or May of each year, so basically next year. But we have to understand that based on the prepared report by a large number of experts, based on the information that they get from the countries, the final resolution on having a country added to this list is being made by the Secretary General. So we have to press on Mr. Gutierrez personally. Well, those who survive the cases of violence, they address him personally, so it's a personalized letter. Yeah, it's a personalized letter. I've been shared one already. So it's a letter to Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yes, the Secretary who is about to approve this resolution. Well, this is where we are about to wrap up. It was a difficult topic about conflict-related sexual violence and how Ukraine will defend its rights and the interests of its citizens. And Ukraine Media Center will continue tomorrow. Hold on, guys.